Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Jump Seat. I'm here with my co-host here, Dave. How are you?
I'm great, John. How are you today?
Doing well, doing well. For those joining the Jump Seat for the first time, it's a weekly spotlight, bringing you key industry insights, thought leadership, and subject matter experts affecting the fire service, and hosted by two Jump Seat firefighters, myself, John Martins, as well as Dave Durstein here. And we are here for episode 7 of the year, season 2 with Jump Seat. And Dave, what's happening in the fire service this week?
You know, there are a number of things happening in the fire service here this week. And in particular, I want to bring one a little closer to me than you. And we're going to come to Ohio, John, to share a little story here that happened on a recent fire up in Lucas County, Ohio. So Lucas County, for those of you guys who don't know, is in the Toledo area of Ohio, so just south of Detroit. And they actually had their first at this specific department. I'm actually trying to get the department's name there. Washington Township had their first all-female engine crew respond to a working structure fire here this week. So great job there to Mandy, Heather, and Jessica. From my understanding, it's a volunteer department there as well. Pretty active, pretty busy department. And they were fortunate enough to have 3 great women show up and make the call and run that engine crew there. And John, I've had the privilege of working with many great women in the fire service, I've got a couple amazing stories in my repertoire of structure fires with a couple of them leading the way and a couple right on my back. So thank goodness for those sisters there, sisters of the fire service who did their part. It's not every day that you see an entire crew full of women. So that's awesome, right. Job. And sounds like they were able to provide their support for the community there. And I think it was actually a mutual aid type fire. So great job to Mandy, Heather, and Jessica from Washington Township.
And for those watching, give us a shout out where you're watching from. Throw it in the comments while we're thinking of different places. Let us know where you're at today.
Absolutely. We love to have the comments. So fire away in the comments field. We actually see it. Hey, Rick.
Got Rick.
Welcome from Ontario, man. Last week we got into the cold debate. I know it's still cold here, but we're a little warmer than last week.
That's right.
We got Jason DeFosse. I see him just commented in from Trentford, Ontario. So I'm fighting with you.
There we go.
John and I are fighting with controls here. So, hey, Jason, glad you're on today. We got another great show. But, one of the other big things that I do want to throw out is, hey, be mindful. Us folks in the north who are used to these frigid conditions, whether it be our brothers up in Canada, to John in Kansas or myself in Ohio, we're used to these cold conditions. But I know we've got some of you who are joining from other areas that aren't used to having the cold as well. So, those of you in the greater Houston area and South Texas, Louisiana, in the United States, they're experiencing an unbelievable cold there. Yeah. Hey, Kirby Wilson, you know what Texas is like right now. And, obviously when it gets cold, water freezes. So it changes the game on how you fight fires. It changes the game on all the various aspects of hydrants working and not working. Are they wet hydrants? Are they dry hydrants? And so just make sure you guys are being safe out there. Obviously, whenever
secondary
ice builds up,
the thaw here coming up, when it does warm up, there's going to be some new challenges. So it's quite an interesting time for sure for the majority of the Midwest region and into the southern states, which is just great. 15 plus inches in Arkansas. That doesn't happen.
No, that's out of the norm, the norm for sure. Hey, do you see this one that just popped in? Kimberly Hester, watching from the North Pole. Welcome from the North Pole. We're glad to have you, and I would agree, Burr. Yeah. We love having you guys here. We've got, I don't know if you've caught them all. We've got North Texas. We've got Marlboro, New Jersey with Keith Badler there. Keith, thanks for jumping on board. We love having you guys all from all over the country. And actually, I even saw Chile. Somebody on here was on here from Chile.
Yep.
Welcome from all over the world. We're glad to have you all here today on a great episode of the Jump Seat. John, right. who do we got today? Who's our guest?
Yeah, so here I'll be bringing him in a minute. He may have a little familiar face for those of you who've been part of the jump seat for a while, but we've got Mr. Toot Lee today again. I think, Toot, you were with us here. Oh, it wasn't cold out yet. It might have been late October, November, something like that. You remember?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
remember.
It was. There was late fall, early winter time frame, and we're glad to have you back on board here, Toot.
absolutely. Glad to be here.
And Toot comes to us from the Beaver Lane Fire Department. He is the chief there and does a lot with our Hearst Jaws of Life side. And we have some awesome visuals here to show you. And we're going to talk today about, as you can see in the title, slicing and dicing. We're talking about blades, cutters, and rams on late model vehicles. And Toot, what do you got for us today?
Well, just with some of the recent study that we were fortunate enough to get the experience with a couple of auto manufacturers just to put the tools and the blades on late model vehicles. So with some were 2018, but most of them were 2020 and 2021 when we went down to do these tests.
So, I mean, it's not every day, Toot, that we get our hands on, I would say normal fire departments get our hands on a late model vehicle. Typically we get what we can get our hands on, and obviously there's different aspects of training on it. So I look at this as a great informational sharing piece today for those of you who don't get a chance to cut on late model vehicles, to learn a little bit more about what you're actually dealing with and what actually happens there. So Toot, we're looking forward to knowing more here about that. But before we jump in maybe a little bit, why don't you tell us a little bit more? Some people who don't know who the heck Toot Lee is, other than a chief from Beaver Lane, North Carolina. Give us a little background on you and a little bit more on your background.
Well, like you've already said, I'm from North Carolina. The town that I'm in is actually called Marshville. And like you said, I'm the chief with Beaver Lane Fire and Rescue. Been here this August to make 32 years. And we strive ourselves to be a aggressive fire department, just like what you guys talked about earlier about females. We've got several females on our department, but we don't separate it. That they're just part of the team, and that's a lot how our emails go out as speaking on the team concept. So been a rescue tool specialist for 8 years, somewhere around there. Been with MES for the last 2 years now. I cover Virginia all the way down to Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, covering that territory for MES.
Fantastic. Toot, what in your years in the fire service, what made you passionate about this focused area within extrication, rescue, learning about the construction of modern vehicles? What gave you fueled you that passion?
There, at one point, I was just like everybody else. I was nervous, didn't know anything. But once I started to put my hands on extrication tools, it clicked with me. Now, don't get me wrong, I've fought a ton of fire and still enjoy it. But my calling, I feel like, is to the rescue side, and I thought I had a path for myself, but the good Lord sent me in the path that He wanted me to. And when I finally listened to Him, a lot of doors started to open up for me. So once I got bit by the bug of just starting those few extrication classes, and I've been hooked ever since.
Good for you. Take a quick moment to read the comment there. We got DeFosse chiming in. Looks majestic.
I was gonna say, it sounds like the good Lord wasn't the only one who had a plan for you. It sounds like DeFosse's got a plan for you also there, Mr. Majestic.
Hey, I told him we was gonna block all his comments, and I wasn't gonna respond to any of them. So don't waste your time anymore, DeFosse.
For those who don't know, check out that last episode. We got pretty good rivalry show going on between the two of them. So if you want entertainment, you can find it. It's pretty simple. Good stuff.
So Toot, obviously, extrication is your passion. It's where you can offer a lot of insight, not only to your local departments, to the rest of the country and the rest of the world here on our show. And so, you took a path here recently to go test some of these reciprocating saw blades on these late model vehicles and really found some amazing stuff out. But why did you decide to go down that path? What was the driving factor that said, hey, we got to test this. Let's go play with these on modern vehicles?
Well, anytime we're out there, we still hear that the recip saw, and the recip saw is a great tool to work our way into a vehicle. But just how far the auto industry has come along with making vehicles so much stronger. We still, when we get to the salvage yard, and it's no different than a demo, we get to the salvage yard and what we have are clunkers, and the recip saws look and perform great on those things. But when we actually get to the cars that we're cutting on the street, it makes a world of difference. So that's why we wanted to go to some of the manufacturers which we felt like were some of the tougher vehicles and put those blades on there just to see the results that we would get. And it was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great piece of the puzzle here. And I know John just threw up kind of the image there of those blades that you in fact were testing, and there's some of the new blades right there on the image there above. So when you tell us, are all blades created equal?
Absolutely not. And that's what the consumer, we need to understand, that when we're buying recip saws blades, that it's not just go in there and find the cheapest blade. Like most of these blades right here are $15 to $16, somewhere in that ballpark. So you've got to spend a little bit of extra money and know what you're buying, and know what material we may get into on passenger vehicles. So just going in there, picking up whichever blade, oh, that's a good blade right there. Those days are way behind us. Need to do some research on that. And that's one of the things that I felt like we had to, when we have the opportunity to go in here, even though our job is to sell, the cutters and things of that nature, everybody can't afford that. So we need to do the test for the people that don't have that resource to buy these cutters all the time, because they've still got to get the job done the best they can. So with our
new comment coming here,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We just had a new comment come from Jack. The effectiveness at our training academy, find the same issue in using clunker versus new. I was just going to say, and we've talked about this before, but what we're cutting on, cars aren't always created equal, right? What we're seeing statistically in a junkyard setting might be statistically different from what we're seeing in a roadway setting, right?
Absolutely.
And what works here might not work there.
And people get the false sensation that it's the higher end cars that have the strongest metal. That's not necessarily the case. Well, it's definitely not the case.
So you kind of talk a little bit there that not all blades are created equal. Not all cars are created equal that we train on. What about the recip saws as a whole? Can I just go get any old reciprocating saw and slap a blade on it, and will it work?
You can, but what we also realize with that, if you buy the smaller recip saws, they do not hold up well on the late model vehicles. You can go out and cut on the clunkers and like, man, we've got this. But when you get to that late model vehicle, it works those saws so hard, and you're probably going to have a failure with your saw also. So you just can't just, any old saw and looking for the cheapest saw that's out there. You get what you pay for, and I'm a strong believer in that.
Yeah, so right off the bat, we've already learned, hey, do your research, play with the different blades, do your research, check out the different saws, because not all of them are created equal, and you got to get the right pairing to make an impact.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Here's just a photo here again of more of a modern image showing the different types of steel within the structural components of this vehicle, for example. Toot, is this pretty standard? Is this just one model? I mean, they all vary, right?
They vary, and I can only speak for this model right here, but they vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, and right. And just by looking at this B post and the roof rail here, people talk about, well, I can make make a pie cut. If their cutter's not able to cut through that B post up high, they can talk about making a pie cut. If you look at that roof rail, it's the same color as the B post. It's the same strength as the B post, besides the lower part of the B post. So if you can't cut through on the B post itself, you're not going to be able to cut through the roof rails either. So that's one thing. Alternative techniques are great, but just the cutters will speak to you. I always talk about listening to your tool also. They'll speak to you and let you know if you're going to be successful or not. So there's a lot has changed in auto manufacturing. Everywhere you see that red, that is extremely strong metal.
Yeah, so I mean, you think about that exact point right there. I look at that red; those are the areas I would think is where we would probably traditionally have taken a recip saw right to. Right? And,
yeah.
And now they're the strongest, most reinforced pieces of that car.
Yeah, and we were able to get through some of the posts. Not saying the recip saws can't cut it, but as far as cutting through as quick as what we're accustomed to doing, that's not going to happen with this model right here. This is a Volvo right here. That's not going to happen, and we were fortunate enough that they were able to bring some out to a site for us to be able to cut on, and we learned a lot very quick. There's some things. This is a Volvo S60. There's some things that I learned on this vehicle that if and I'll talk about our department, if myself and all our team was on that actual pin job with this vehicle, there's no doubt that we would have struggled, because we had to make some cuts that I'm not accustomed to having to deal with cuts, and I've ever had to make those type of cuts where we made them to make some relief cut. And everybody knows I'm a big fan of the no relief dash lift, but with that magnesium dash support beam, that's the problem with those type of dash support beams. There's magnesium in there. It's so brittle that once the spreader starts to load up on it, it's just going to fracture. So that would not, if we run up today, that would not be my go-to tactic with this vehicle. Well, you can tell the magnesium, but definitely if we had a S60, I would not try that. We had to, if you see down, I'm pointing, but you can't see. You see where the rocker panel and the lower A post comes together?
Yep, John, you want to slide your mouse over that there, kind of in that region there?
Yeah, in that area right there. That's where we would make our cuts at. Instead of coming down into the rocker panel where it curves at. I see a lot of people, they'll make a cut right there, try to make a cut there. Just be mindful wherever a cutter or wherever metal bends at, that's become a stronger area. So try to avoid that. But come in there midway, I try to get the wire and harness hole, and we've got to sever all the way through that lower A post. If you just make a partial cut on that right there, you'll have complete failure. No ram spreader is going to move that, making a partial cut on there. This isn't a tool brand battle or anything. Well, my spreader do this, my cutter do, or my spreaders will still bend. No, it will not. Sometimes you have to eat a little bit of crow to truly understand that. So sever that lower A post is as deep as you can into the firewall area. And you see the upper rail here, the yellow part and the green part where the strut tower is. That area there, we find that area. This is why it's important to peel that fender off so you can actually see the body structure of the car. This is what you want to see when you're cutting. Blind cuts equals disaster at some point in time, because if you leave the fender on there, your cutter blades could come in and engage the actual shock and fracture your blade. So try to get that fender off if possible. So we made
another question come in real quick here from
sir.
Shepard. Shepard said, "Is the lower B pillar intentionally designed to be a weaker area? And would you say that the lower B pillar is a safe bet for a weaker part of that pillar?" So he's talking lower B here.
For this vehicle, absolutely. As you can see, even though, I mean, it's still very strong, but it's for this vehicle right here, yes. But don't assume that with all vehicles, because what they're trying to do is basically protect our from our waist up when we're sitting in a vehicle all the way up to our head. So typically, the higher you come up, the more reinforced that B post is going to be with multiple layers in there. And I can't speak for every manufacturer because obviously I hadn't cut every car out here, but that's one of the things that we do see when we're out there.
Okay. You know, there was another question that came in here too. Did you all try a portaband in this mix?
We did not. We didn't have that with us. The only thing we had was obviously our Hirsch tools and the recip saw and the different blades.
So to take us, you know, to that next kind of step in here, in that, you know, obviously we look at this and understand that there's several different layers of advanced steel in this design of this car, right? And so, you know, why don't you maybe show us some more of your findings and lead us down that path of all blades are not created equal.
Well, I mean, I don't know what all different types of steel was in this vehicle right here, or matter of fact, any vehicle. Once our cutters or our recip saws engage, you'll be able to tell pretty quick that the cutters are starting to load up, especially the hydraulics. You'll hear them starting to load up, going to second stage. So that's a definite giveaway that, hey, we're cutting something hard. So, and you're just not going to be able to fly through this material like people think. So just for example, when we're out doing demos and we have a cutter that just smokes right through a B post or an A post or whatever it may be, well, that gives a customer a false sense of security that they've got a small cutter and it just cut right through this material with no problem. So, man, I'm good to go. And then when they get on that brand new vehicle, it's a totally different animal. You realize quicker that, hey, I didn't buy the right thing. So I caution people that only to buy a small cutter as their only cutter. I'm a big fan of small cutters. They have their place, but it shouldn't be your only cutter. This is not brand related. We're talking about saving lives here. Just don't make your sole purchase off find the lightest cutter that's out there from whatever manufacturer.
So, when you were using these various blades, John, you had it up there a minute ago, all the newer blades that were in there, you jumped the image now to the used blades there.
Whoops, so those aren't new. Here,
those aren't new blades. So
there they are.
So kind of give us an overview of what did you actually test? I think they were all carbide tipped blades. Is that right?
That is correct. All of the blades made it through to an extent, but there were several that were just, they were done. They didn't want any more of the material. And the one thing that we didn't do, we don't lubricate our blades, and that's a big battle about lubricate to not lubricate. We just don't spend the manpower tying somebody up to lubricate a blade to free a patient. That's how our department does things. However somebody else's department chooses to do it, that's totally up to them, and I respect that. But what we found that the Lennox, and this is not a plug for them, this is just facts. We found the Lennox was a little more durable, that we could continue to try to get to a second cut, and the other blades, they were just done or never. Some didn't make it through. As when we go to this next slide, some blades didn't make it through at all. It was just smoking the teeth off of it. And once you start to see the sparks coming from the recip saw, you would see you're losing your teeth on your blade at that point.
Mm-hmm. And do you see a lot of guys using their, I'll say, downward pressure, thinking it's going to help? Does it really help, or is it let the tool cut, let the tooth dig till it smokes? I mean, what are you seeing out?
We did put some pressure on it, and you could tell a difference from it by adding some pressure to it.
Sure.
But as you can see, like the yellow blade, it did not like it at all. We barely got past the paint with that blade. And not a bad thing on the blade, because it's a good blade.
Yeah. I had a quick question. Kirby asked, when you did this testing, was this on a battery saw or a corded saw?
Yeah, these are all battery powered recip saws, Kirby.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, we got a whole bunch of questions coming in here. Obviously, various things about the blade pressure. We had people talking about obviously the battery versus corded type ones. But one of the ones that popped up here a minute ago was gentleman, John Costello. John, thanks for throwing us out there, because most of us will not have the opportunity to cut new cars outside the factory. Lucky for you, Toot. Do you encourage the use of Onscene reference programs to map out the strategies, or do you feel that leads to too much of a cookbook type rescue?
Well, like on our rescue, we've got the program, the crash recovery system, so we can find out what kind of vehicle it is before we arrive. I also have it in my vehicle, but obviously I can't do it driving down the road. But we do find out. We try to find out as much information as possible when we're going to a cut job. But it's a lot of it's trial and error. I'm not always on the scene. Obviously, I get to cut more cars than anybody on our department, but I'm always not on the scene. But we got a great team here that does a good job, and they formulate a plan. Obviously, we bought the proper tools to try to address, hopefully address whatever we run into. But we know that I can't sit here and say, oh, we can cut everything out here. I don't know if I'm answering this question like he's wanting, but I'm trying the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a great piece there as well. Here, this was one, I'm not totally sure. The CRS can be a good EAD to plan your actions. That came from Roll there.
Yeah, and they have come a long way with that program. We can call for the tag number as long as that vehicle's registered to the right vehicle. We can call for the tag. They give us the state and the tag number, and we can pull that vehicle right up on our screen as we're rolling down the road, and then we would call back and say, hey, is it a 2021 Ford Edge? And if they confirm that, okay, we feel like we've got the right vehicle pulled up. If it's a Ford Edge and we call it a Chevy Silverado, we know it's not registered. The tag's not on the right vehicle.
Mm-hmm. So
Perfect.
Switching gears a little bit here, I know we've got some good comments coming through, and thank you everybody for doing that. We'll hit as many as we can. But Toot, I did want to ask, what are some common areas people are stumbling with tool selection? Where are you seeing repeat mistakes made unintentionally when selecting their package of tools? Where are you seeing guys missing the mark?
Well, it's the biggest part is what I've already addressed, is that don't make your sole purchase off buying the small piston cutters. Even though they can handle some material, don't just make that sole purchase. Well, man, it's lightweight, we can handle it, and it's not going to tire us out. The biggest thing is, hey, I bought a lightweight cutter, but what good is that lightweight doing if I can't get into the vehicle by making these cuts that I need to cut?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest failure. You don't want to spend $9,000 on a cutter, and the first cut job you go to, you can't cut through the material with everything working properly. So you've got a $9,000 boat anchor on that call right there.
Yeah. So very compartment dependent on budget, resources, what kind of compartment space you have, right? All those things play into those decisions.
Absolutely. No matter, everybody knows I'm a fan of a big spreader. Nobody's ever changing my mind on that. But there's no point in me talking to a department about a big spreader if they don't have the compartment space.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I think that same thing goes in line with what we've already heard here today, right? So you gotta do your investigation. You gotta look at it. Price doesn't always make a difference either, right? Actually, we just had a question that came in. I know it's up your alley here, but we'll hit that one in a minute here. I'll throw it on the screen. But the other piece of the puzzle is just like we talked about with the blades, we talked about with the saws, you talk about with the cutters. I think the same would apply to spreaders, right? And that leads us right to Michael Lombardi's question here. Chief, I know you're a big spreader fan. 799 or 789, and why?
Yeah.
And first off, for those of you who don't know, what's a 799 and a 789? For those who don't know that vernacular.
That's actually a Hurst cutters. That's not a spreader. And I'm assuming he's jumping from spreader to cutter. I'm a fan of the 789. It gives me almost the best of both worlds. Our 799 is a tremendous cutter. It's just raw power. It's the strongest cutter we have. It's got an F5 rating, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Our 789 has a F5 rating. It's a little bit quicker than the 799, but I'm not looking for me as an operator. I'm not looking for the fastest cutter that I can possibly find out here. That can lead to some issues from time to time, especially if you got somebody that's really not has a lot of experience on a tool. Let's just put it that way. But I like the 789. Both cutter blades, what we call our box style cutter blades, they both have that. And obviously the 799 is a little bit heavier and quite a bit slower than the 789. And that's where if I had to buy one cutter today, it would be the 789. That's my go-to cutter when we're demoing. I put everything on the ground, but that's my go-to cutter. I feel like that's our ultimate cutter right there. Outside of if I get into something that we really, if we can't cut through it with the 8.9, we would go grab our 799 then.
Sounds like Kirby Wilson agrees with you there because he threw the 789 is still an F5. That's his choice there. So not the only one in that mix. You know, hey, you mentioned there just a minute ago F5, and I've heard F4. And what are you talking about?
Tornadoes. I'm thinking tornadoes. You know.
Well, you know, the NFPA came out. They have the NFPA cut bar test, but I focus a little bit more on the F bar because that is replicating what we're cutting from the strength of the vehicles. It only goes up to a F7, and it really lets you see how strong the cutter is, what kind of reserve energy or what kind of reserve power it has left. So obviously the lower the number, the less the cutter is going to be able to cut with new car technology.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to emphasize on again, is that NFPA rating, which is really going to show you, and that's just sheer cut strength, right? In that rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll help to identify that true cutting ability of the tools that are actually available and out there.
It's like our new 378 cutter. It's a F4, and everything that we put on it, from the vehicles that I've talked about that we did the test with the recip blades, it has cut everything that we put on it. That we put it on. So I'm very impressed with that cutter.
Jason threw out that cutter will cut the arm off of Superman. So I agree, Jason. I agree. So we kind of talked about stumbling blocks, you know, where people will actually, you know, maybe make misselections in the tool process, maybe even in some of the sales pitches, right? So when I think about taking those cutters, we started off with recip blades here, and that they're not all created equal. But when I start taking these cutters or spreaders to these late model vehicles, what are 3 things that you would say, hey, Dave, before you go diving in with that cutter, or before you go diving in with these, you need to be aware of what because of these modern late model vehicles?
Well, blind cuts, tool tip loading, and the blade separation. That's a dead giveaway that you're getting into some extremely hard metal. And we see people that they want to try to tip load with cutters all the time. That puts a lot of stress on the cutter blades when you're tip loading. You need to make sure that your cutter can wrap all the way around whatever object you're cutting, and that it can basically pull itself into the material, getting back to the throat of the cutter. So just we discourage tip load, and what happens that you get on those tips and you get on a extremely hard piece of metal, and that cutter would just rotate, and as that rotation happens, the blades are separating. And there's sometimes I've seen people they'll stay on the trigger. I'm like, you got to back off the trigger because your blades are separating, getting ready to break. And when they do break, they come out like a missile, and that's the other thing. Make sure you're putting hard protection between you and the interior rescue, or the tool and the interior rescuer and the patient. We've got to protect our patient, and soft protection with a blanket is not going to get it. We've got to have some hard protection with our patients, and cutting loose ends of advanced steel. That's the other part that we've got to be mindful of. We've got to capture that. When we're cutting the A post that we're going to jack the dash, we always cut a gap out of there. We always try to cut about a 4-inch gap out of there, roughly, whatever you choose to do. But when you make that first cut, we're fine. But when you start to make that second cut, you need to grab it with a spreader, combi tool, or something, so you can have that energy captured in that spreader, so it doesn't come out as another flying piece of object and hit you or the patient or the interior rescue.
That was good. When we talked the other day, that was a good reminder for me, is all that energy, it's stored somewhere. You can't see it all the time, but it's stored, and it will go somewhere eventually. And it's just a good reminder of like you're talking about, is capturing that proactively before it
when we're talking about energy, what we do a lot of the times, we don't make a lot of relief cuts at our fire department that's for your patient. Whatever people choose to do, that's totally up to them. Just know different ways to do things. But when we're out in the salvage yard, what we'll do a lot of times, we try to do it all the time, but nothing happens 100% of the time. I will have students to put their hands on the car while somebody's making a cut. And if you make a good cut, you can feel that energy release through your body. If I'm running a cutter, if I'm happen to be making a relief cut, you're going to see some part of my body next to the car on the vehicle actually touching it, so I can feel that energy release. I can be on the opposite side of the vehicle and they're making a cut. If they make a good cut, I can feel that energy transfer, and I'm like, okay, they made a good cut. So I don't have to be right there on top of it to feel it. So you just use that feel so you can tell what's going on if you're in charge of the rescue, or if you're running the cutter yourself.
So kind of like when you're pumping a truck and you lean your leg against that intake, same type of deal, just with a totally different kind of energy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
Kirby said, "Oops, Dave."
Sorry, I just was throwing one in there.
There we go.
Hey, Toot, your opinion: cutting before spreading, ramming, or try to push first and then cut?
Our go-to tactic is obviously to try to push or spread before our cut, but each wreck is different. So we go with the game plan, what's going to best suit that incident right there. But if we can spread before then, we will. I'm not a big fan of taking we blow out the whole side, but we try to take it by section. And the reason we take it by section is that we try to free, if our driver is the one that's peeing, we always like to make a big hole. I'm not going to say what I typically say about a big hole. You can follow my social media post and figure that out. But what we try to do is we'll take the door completely off, and then we'll go ahead and get the dash up off our patient. And then we go back and we concentrate on making finishing off the rear door and the B post. And the reason we've changed that up is because if I'm focused on getting our back door open and cutting the B post, or blowing the B post out with the spreader, or ram, whichever you choose to do, if my patient crashes at that point and they're still physically held down by the dash, we can't do a snatch and go at that point if they just coded. So that's why we've changed up. We immediately door, dash up, finish off the rear. Now, if the patient medic says, "Hey, the patient just coded," now we can go straight into pulling the patient out. They're not physically held in there. And instead of us getting finishing off the back door, we've now got just go ahead and stop that operation, get our patient on out.
So, Toot, the question came in: when will you take the roof then?
Dude, I can't tell you. Wheel resting vehicles, we hardly ever take a roof. We took one this past winter with one of our mutual aid companies, and that's been the first time that we've taken a roof in a long time. If the rep dictates it, obviously we will, but we hardly ever take one wheel resting. Side resting, obviously the roof goes at that point, but we can make enough space without taking a roof. But we will take the roof if we need to. And I'm talking from our operations. I'm not knocking what somebody else does. I'm just talking about our side of things.
No, and I think, when you look at that, you've got a lot of experience in cutting, and so I think that goes a long way to sharing your knowledge and gained experience from this space. One of the other questions that I saw here was, are Rams effective on late model vehicles?
Yes and no. It's going to get into what type of material you get into, and that's one of the reasons that I really like our Rams, because they, we use them. You can use them as a cutting tool also. When we're like that, we talked about the pie cut. We're ripping the B-posts from the roof rail. If it's spot welded, we can break those spot welds with the Rams. But actually, absolutely, Rams are completely underutilized. People look at, most of the time we see Rams being used, it's just to push a dash. But man, there's so many different things you can do with the Ram. And talking about the roof, once we get the side out, if we need just a little more head space, we drop our 59-inch Ram in there, push that roof up, pull it out. Now we've created, additional 5 or 6 inches or more just by pushing the Ram up, and still the roof's intact. Just not tying up a lot of time taking a roof off.
Yeah,
and
there's a good comment there. Says every action in relation to the wreck and the patient. So this isn't a cookie cutter operation. It's everyone's unique. See what's needed.
And one of the things I also I'm really just, I can't use the words I want to use. We always have your tools in a working position. Spreaders should be closed, cutters should be open. It drives me insane for somebody to make a cut and they barely open the cutter up enough. They'll start trying to pull the cutter out to get it. It's still wrapped around the post, and they try to pull the cutter out. Open your cutter up and get it right back in the working position. I've seen people come from one side of the vehicle. They get to that vehicle. Now we've got to stand there and wait for them to open up the cutter when they should have been opening that cutter up as they were walking around. So tools shouldn't be laying on the ground when we're up there in the hot zone. There should be a tool in somebody's hand. We want a safe and fast extrication. A lot of people say, I want to get them out as fast as I can. We want to get them out safe and fast, because don't compromise C-spine just to get somebody out fast. I see so many people, they'll leave that B-post in. We twist the patient. Now we just compromise C-spine. If they were complaining about back injury, we just made it worse.
So no, they're great points too, and I think this is another one, because we got a lot of good questions coming in on the comment line. So this was from Shepard here. In this case, they have these calls with unrestrained patients, some agonal in the back seat in an odd position. We always opted to just take the roof and grab them quickly due to the declining state. Would you say that's the quickest or best move if all side doors were still accessible?
If that's what worked for them and it was a successful outcome, I can't argue with their technique, and nor am I going to argue their technique. At the end of the day, you've got to go with what you feel is right. I don't want to be that guy that sits around and, oh man, why did they do that? That made no sense, because I wasn't there. If that's what they felt like was the right way to go, hey, I support you. Now behind the scenes, I might talk a little different. But no, I'm just not going to be that guy,
So, Toot, here's another question that just rolled in here. How's the hinges on new vehicles versus older vehicles?
A lot tougher, and that's where tip loading those cutters is going to get you in trouble. Once you tip load them, you fracture. Now you've extended that extrication. If you're a department that only had one cutter, now you've destroyed that cutter, and you still got a patient pinned inside. But absolutely, Curtis, the hinges are a lot stronger than what they used to be.
Yeah. So
And
one more.
the good thing about these vehicles is they're protecting us a lot better as a consumer. But high speed impacts, tractor trailers hitting trees, things of that nature. It's a bad result for us at some point in time.
So here was one. Recognizing you're a fan of big holes, Chief, on smaller cars, do you advocate capturing what's been pushed with your Rams to reduce the reduction of doorway space by tool clutter, things of that nature?
Yeah, well, what we try to do is we call it hyperextending. If we jack a dash or if we push a dash with the Ram, we try to go a little further than what we need. So even though we have a ton of tools on scene, we still don't want a tool tied up in our way to hold a dash or whatever it may be, hold that back. So that's why we try to go several inches past where we need to. So when we retract that Ram or retract that spreader, the return of the dash doesn't come back on our patient. So now our tool is out of our way. So we made this big hole for purchase. We made this big hole for a reason. So now that we've got all that space back to us, we cluttered it up for a little bit to make the space. Now we've got that big hole back to us.
Mm-hmm.
I think comments. That was one of those. Yeah, I think that's one of the key points we talked about just on our sidebar the other day too. Yeah. And that particularly with these late model vehicles, that return rate, right?
Absolutely. When we were experimenting and not making proper cuts, just making some partial cuts, what we did on one of the vehicles, we pushed it with the Ram. We hardly got any separation, but the B-post the rocker panel was just picking extremely high up off the ground. And when we returned that Ram, that car came back together like it had never been pushed, cut, or anything. The only reason you knew that we had cut it because you could see where we cut that little partial cut at. It was insane to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes back to I'm going to bring up Jason DeFosse again. I'm sorry to, but we did have Jason on here a couple weeks ago. And that was one of his big things was pry an inch, crib an inch, and trying to maintain some other way of securing or containing that gap as you've created it too. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely, and this has more to do with lifting, just because you just triggered something with me. And one of my buddies, I shared a post the other day from we recreated an accident that happened up north somewhere. I don't remember exactly where it was, but anyway, we did that this past Monday, and in that process, we had picked up the vehicle and we removed our chaser struts out. And one of my buddies asked me, he's like, man, I'm gonna be that guy, lifting inch, crib an inch. And we've all heard that statement, but one of the things that we've been teaching real hard the last few years is that our cribbing should always be in contact with whatever we're lifting. If we're lifting an object, that cribbing, chaser strut, whatever it may be, should be in contact. Because let's take, for instance, I crib an inch, 4,000 pounds. 4,000 pounds falls back down on a patient 1 inch. How much damage are we going to do to a patient with 4,000 pounds falling back onto a patient? So if my cribbing stays in contact the whole time, it's not that object doesn't have anywhere to fall to. So I know that's a little side note, but that's one of the things that we're doing. Make sure that cribbing's always in contact.
Mm-hmm. Jason DeFosse just sent in Preload. So I don't know if you want to share more on Preload.
Yeah, he's just talking about capturing, like if I'm jacking a dash with the spreader, and before we make that cut into that A post, before we make that gap, we'll go ahead and put our spreader in to that lower A post where we made that cut at. So now I'm gonna put some tension on that, because if I don't put tension on that, the only thing at this point that's holding holding. Another reason I don't like to, if I take the roof's not going to be the first time. Let me back up a minute. That's another reason I don't like to take the roof. If your department takes the roof and you make all the relief cuts with the dash that's pressing down on the patient legs, when you take that roof and you make that relief cut into the lower A post, and then you make that relief cut into the upper rail, that dash is already under tension to push down, and it's already sitting on your patient's leg. So if you don't put that ram or spreader in there to grab that, it's going to go further down on the patient. So if right off the gate, if your roof is the first thing, you've already eliminated some possibility, or you've created some possibility that we're going to injure the patient even more by that dash being pushed down further. So what Jason's saying is preload it with a ram or spreader. So when I put my spreader in, and we will put a little bit of pressure on that lower A post, and for the dash to go up. And now when they come in and make that 4-inch section out of the A post, it doesn't go anywhere because the spreader is preloaded and has it captured.
Thanks for the clarification on that too, as well as Jason. Thanks for bringing that back to my attention, because that's where my head was going there before.
So we got a picture to show here yet. Let me get this thing going. Tell us what we got going on here, Toot.
This is a Dodge Chrysler. I know all the guys that have cut and dealt with this. I already knew what that gun barrel was right there, but that's gun barrel bull run, what we call it. It's some of the hardest metal out there, and Dodge was way ahead of their time. That's from a 2006 Dodge Caravan, and that is a bear to cut right there.
So you called it gun barrel steel, huh?
It is, yes. It's just because it looks like a shotgun barrel, and man, I'm telling you, that thing is hard to cut. And that's a 788. We made multiple cuts with it. I have that piece with me. I take it with me on demos because I've got several sections of it. I don't like to just cut it out in the yard, but I did do that because it can wreak havoc on some blades. So, but if you want to know if your cutter can cut, you get on some of that right there.
And Toot, I got to throw in a question I just thought of. How does the extreme weather, I mean, I have a suspicion, but how does the extreme weather, like what we've seen in some of the Midwest states, how does that affect our job doing this stuff?
I don't have to experience that. Some of these guys that have that extreme weather, I don't like to talk on stuff that I don't know about.
All right, you're in luck.
I've not had to deal with that.
Okay, I just thought of that just randomly. So, I mean, the last week has been trying on a lot of our equipment in general, pumps, our valves, right. I mean, there's been a lot of.
I'm sure it's got to have some kind of effect on it, but like I said, I don't want to.
Yep.
I don't know, and I'm the guy that if I don't know, I'm not going to just make something up and just. Oh man, that sounded good.
Hey, John, hold your arm up, John, because I got long sleeves on. You got long sleeves on. Toot, what are you wearing right now? Yeah, see, he's in that warm state. He's down in that warm state. We don't know about that at all, John. So,
yeah.
Oh man,
whatever. Man.
Actually, Jason DeFossi said it sucks. It sucks is what his response to the cold is. But hey, Toot, we've been on here for about 50 minutes and had an incredible amount of feedback from our guests. We covered a lot of things from, hey, not all recip blades are created equal, specifically in new or late model vehicles. What other final things would you leave our viewers today with that it said, hey, I just want you guys to walk away with this?
With our job, it allows us to get experience on late model vehicles. Talk to some of these guys that you know do the same job that I do, and get some knowledge from them. And it's like we talk. I tell when we're teaching class, I'm like, treat this class like a buffet bar. What you like, add it on your little plate. What you don't like, leave it at the bar, because you're not going to like everything I tell you, and I'm not going to like everything you tell me. Just add what you like to your little toolbox or your plate, and do your homework on the tools. Make sure that you're buying the proper tools that is going to get the job done, not just because well, I like this color better. Make sure you're spending money for your community. I look at it as I want my family to have the best stuff that they possibly need if they get in that accident. And I hope that department has looked at it, value it as how does this tool perform on vehicles and not all the other gadgets and gadgets. I bought this Hearst tool to do work on a passenger vehicle or a vehicle, period. That's what I want to, that's what I should focus on from that standpoint. Make sure you're doing your homework, whatever you buy, make sure you're doing true homework with that and not just going with the flow, you know. Take some time, and because it's a game changer with what the auto industry is providing for us as citizens.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
Toot, thank you so much for joining us. By the way, everybody, at the bottom of the screen right down here, I got to get my fingers right there at the bottom of the screen. Check out Toot Lee at Premier Extrication on Facebook. He's always posting a lot of information, educational pieces, challenging your thinking, but also giving you more insight to what's happening in the world of extrication today. You know, if you got additional questions, you didn't get a chance to ask them here today, or you're watching after we're live, no worries. Toot's willing to answer those questions, help people out. You can catch him at tlee803@gmail.com.
So we'll be live tomorrow some. I'll be live tomorrow some. We've got a class for, you know, at home here in North Carolina. We'll be doing a class with limited students, but we'll be doing a heavy lift stabilization lift class tomorrow, and I'll go live several times as much as I can because obviously I'll be teaching. But just join us and comment, and we'll all have a good time. So I definitely enjoyed it and appreciate. It's an honor to come back on.
Real quick. There was one question we didn't get to. We can't stop without it. Anybody know? Anybody see one come through? How did you get the name Toots? It was so early in the show, but I had to save it for last.
That's the end of the show. There's nothing funny about how I got to. One of these days, I'm going to make up a good. Well, I already got a good story, but I cannot say it on that.
Well, we sure appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you guys for having us on. I hope I answered some questions, and I'll try to go through the comments and try to answer things the best I can. Yes, sir, Jason. Thank you, and Kirby and everybody else. Carl. I'm seeing somebody pop up there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You have a great weekend. Good luck cutting tomorrow. We'll be jumping on. I'm gonna try to grab Premier Extrication's live piece tomorrow. And I just got, what is this, man? There's all kinds of ones coming in here. Oh, Toot, I got to share this one, man, because this one just popped up.
He thought he was done.
No, my kids are watching right now. My kids are watching, and they really want to know the story, Toot. They're not the only ones.
There's no story behind it.
Oh my goodness! Well,
there's not.
Anyway, you're blowing up the thank yous here. A great information, seriously today. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time we get you back on the jump seat here at some point in the future as well.
Absolutely. And last thing, prayers to everybody that's going through difficult times and with the weather and the COVID. So everybody be safe out there. I love everybody, and just have a blessed day. Thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks too. Well, John, I'll let you take it home from here, and you lead us to the wrap up.
Yeah, no, that was good. That was a fun-filled session there. So, anyways, thanks everybody for joining and making it fun with the comments and giving Toot some teases and asking him why his name's Toots and all that good stuff. So, always good info. And Dave, I look forward to next Friday. Next time we have our jump seat as well, and it's good information for the fire service. So,
as usual. We love that you click the little like button there. I've seen a whole bunch popping up on our screens. Continue to like us, but also we'd ask that you actually share this. We intend for our show to be educational for everybody in the fire service. And our goal is to make sure you guys all come home and we know a little bit more and can act a little bit safer every single day as emergency professionals and emergency responders. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Also, we love to hear your ideas and suggestions for new people to have on the show, or new things you want to know about. Throw them in the comments field. We catch them and we try to pull them in and make them available to you. Thank you all very much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in the jump seat.
See ya.